All right. Well, nice to see you guys. I want to welcome you not only to our Henderson location, I want to welcome each of our locations. I want to say a big shout out to Central Summerlin and Southern Highlands, Sunrise Mountain, Kingman, those who are joining us in different prison facilities through our partnership with God Behind Bars, and those who are watching online. Thank you guys for being with us. Well, it's Christmas time. It's Christmas time. How many of you have all the Christmas lights up, all the decorations, all of that? How many of you, that's still to come? You're working on that. It's going to happen. Some of you are probably still wondering if you're even going to do it this year, right? So much going on. Maybe if I just bide my time, we'll just be there. But at some point, at least around our house, the decorations go up. We've put our decorations up, and so when we did, it felt like Christmas time was really happening. Because see, I can't judge it by Christmas music because I listen to that all year round. So I don't know about you, but probably it looks something like this. You get a box that looks something like this out of the attic or the basement or the closet or, the garage or whatever. And, you set it up and you start getting the Christmas decorations out, and first you got lights. And have you ever wondered, I'm always like, man, I can tell you I was more careful last year when I put these lights in this box that they were all nicely organized and everything was good. And then you get them out, it's like, how'd they get so jumbled? How'd that happen? So you've got lights. Then you got ornaments. You start going through all your different ornaments. Maybe you've got some nice ones. Maybe you've got some real pretty ones. My wife likes for all the ornaments to match. But then we've also got sentimental ornaments, right? The ones your kids made. The ones that your parents passed down to you or whatever, right? So when it comes to sentimental ornaments, I don't know about you, I get sentimental. I pull these ornaments out and I'm like, oh man, remember back then when our kids were little, we didn't sleep, and man, I miss those times. I miss that season, right? And I'll say to Lori, man, maybe we should adopt. Maybe we should get some more kids around here. And Lori's like, what are you talking about? Stop. But I miss some of those seasons. Or I think about my parents, that I love dearly, both of whom have gone on to be with the Lord. And I think of all the Christmases growing up, and I'm like, man, another Christmas without them, and here we go into it. And so I find when I go through the ornaments, I get a little nostalgic, I get a little sentimental, I can even get a little moody in that moment. And then there's other things, there's wrapping paper, we start pulling out bows and all the paper. And I don't know about you, but when I start pulling out all that stuff, I start thinking about all the things I still have to do. I got to figure out what Lori wants for Christmas, which is the hardest person in the world to shop for. I got to figure out what my kids want. We got to get all this stuff. We got to get it wrapped. Did we even pay for Christmas last year yet? We got to figure all this stuff out. Because it's game on. It's Christmas time. And this is a wonderful time of year. It's a joyful time of year. And it can also be a really heavy, sad time of year. And so I think I want to just look today and over the next few weeks, continue looking at how faith can help make the holiday season merry and bright. Some of you, you're gung-ho about Christmas. You're fired up. You're singing Christmas songs. Your decorations are already up. You're ready to go. It's like Christmas. Isn't it awesome? It's the most wonderful time of year. And others of you are not so much. And all this stuff going on, Christmas music, and you're thinking about this holiday season, maybe you're not going to be with somebody that you wish you were going to be with or that you were with in years past. Maybe somebody isn't coming home who you hoped would come home, who came home in years past. Maybe you're looking at Christmas this year under a lot of financial strain and pressure, and the whole thing just begins to look different. Or maybe you've got much bigger concerns, and it just feels like Christmas is happening, and you're just sort of going to be caught up in it, but the sooner you can get through it, the better, and move on to the bigger challenges in your life. How do we make Christmas, to the best of our ability, merry and bright? Well, to talk about that, I want to look at the first Christmas story with you. And I don't mean in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the biographies of Jesus. We'll look at that in the coming weeks. I want to go back even earlier than that to a Christmas story that was told through prophecy in the book of Isaiah 700 years before Jesus was born. 700 years before Jesus was born, this guy guy named Isaiah comes along. He's a prophet. He's very important. He's not only got a whole book in the Old Testament of the Bible named Isaiah, he's actually quoted 50 different times in the latter part of the Bible, the New Testament of the Bible. So very important there. And in the Christmas story, the birth of Jesus in the Gospels, Isaiah is quoted. And so here's what Isaiah wrote 700 years before Christ was born. Check it out. When we get to the red word, I'm going to ask you just to the highlighted word to read that out loud here with me. But Isaiah chapter 9, beginning in verse 2, says, the people who walk in darkness will see a great what? Light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. Now this is 700 years before Christ is born. And Isaiah is looking out and he's going, for those who walk in a time of darkness, a light will shine. Christmas is about God's light shining into our world and even shining into our hearts and shining through us into the lives of others. So how do we experience it? One of the first things we can simply do is to seek out the light. Seek out the light over the next few weeks, this holiday season. Get intentional about it in your life. Now, how many of you like to jump in the car and go check out Christmas lights? Anybody like to drive around, check it out, do all that, just sort of take it in? My daughter, she's perpetually bummed out because every year I sort of con my way around not putting up Christmas lights on the outside of our house. We'll decorate on the inside, but on the outside, I'm like, that's too much work. I'm a pastor. We're gonna do Christmas services. You know, I work every angle I can, and she's always saying, Dad, you're robbing me of my entire childhood. That's what's happening right now. And so when we drive down our street, there's a few houses that have some lights up now, and she's like, oh, look at that, Dad. Look at the Christmas spirit there. And we get to our house, and she's like, the black hole. Here it is, nothing. So I'm still trying to hold out. We'll see how we do. But it's fun to drive around, take in the lights, kind of look at them, enjoy them. Do you know that ABC actually did a contest last year called the Great Light Fight and Christmas Light Fight? And people decorated their house and all of that. And somebody not far from our Henderson location in Boulder City won the national contest. Check it out. We've got a picture of this house here. Look at that. It took them 2 months to get that wired up. 2 months to get done. And can you imagine if you were their neighbor? Talk about the black hole. Like anything next to that's gonna look bad. What do you do if you're the neighbor to somebody like this? I think he did what this other guy did in a different scenario. He just put the little arrow up, ditto, what they did. Those guys right there. But it's an interesting time because Christmas season is actually our darkest period. You know, it's a season where it's dark 14 to 16 hours a day. The sun goes down early, and yet it's also a time when you can shine light and enjoy light. And Isaiah's looking out and he's going, there's people who are walking in darkness, and a light is about to dawn. Look at Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. Let's look at it again. He says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the what? Shadow of death, a light has dawned. The shadow of death. That's a kind of a poetic phrase. It could be translated in some translations. It says, for those who are walking in darkness, or it could literally read, for those who are walking in deep darkness in their lives. To those individuals, a light is shining. And so when you think about your own life, your own journey, some of you, maybe you're in a place where there's some deep darkness going on right now. And darkness can enter into our lives in a whole lot of different ways. In fact, it was Tim Keller, pastor and scholar. He says that when the Bible speaks about darkness, there's kind of two different meanings. One meaning is evil, and the other meaning is ignorance. Here's what he says. In the Bible, the word darkness refers to evil and ignorance. It means first that the world is filled with evil and untold suffering. There's violence, there's injustice, there's the abuse of power, there's homelessness, there's refugees fleeing oppression, there's families ripped apart, there's bottomless grief. He says the other way our world is in the dark is that no one knows enough to cure the evil and the suffering in it. So darkness refers not only to the stuff in our lives that we don't want, it can also refer to our frustration of not being able to deal with it. If you feel like you're in a dark season in your life, in a dark time, what do? Well, Isaiah is reminding us that Christmas is about Christ's light coming into the world. And he was looking ahead to it. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, the New Testament center around it. And we live on the other side of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. We look back to it. And so what we can do to make our holiday to the best of our ability, merry and bright, is simply seek out the light. Seek it out in the next few weeks in your life. Get intentional about it. What do I mean about that? I mean, be aware of what influences you in your life. I remember when I was a kid growing up, my mom, I started listening to rock and roll. I come in, I listen to rock and roll and all my bands, and I was into music and all of that. And I had my Ozzy Osbourne poster up in my room and, the whole deal. And I remember my mom saying, that music's going to influence you. How many of you had a mom say stuff like that? Like that music's going to impact you. It's going to influence you. And you know what I say? No, it's not. Nobody influences me. Right? That's what teenagers say. I influence others. Nobody influences me, Mom. But I look back now, and you know what? Mama was right. Mama, now I still love rock and roll, but look, music does influence, right? Friends have influence. I'd start hanging around a certain group of friends, and they'd all come over, and my mom would say, you do not need to be hanging around with that boy so-and-so. I said, there's nothing wrong with him, and she's like, it is not going to end well. And she was right. She was right. And I got into a whole lot of trouble, and it was my fault, but it was also the people that I was running around with. We all got in trouble. They influenced me, I influenced them, and I think we all influenced each other to do a whole lot of not good. And that's all about influences in our lives. And I think the same is, even though we're adults and we're mature, we can recognize influences, when you're in a season of darkness, some of you feel down, you feel depressed, some of you, you're just not a lot of joy going on right now in your life. And we all go through seasons like that. If that's where you're at, seek out the light. Be intentional. Make sure to listen to some things that are going to be uplifting to you this week in your life. Make sure to do what you're doing. Get around church. Get around people of faith. Get around people who have joy. Get around people who are sharing love. Get around people who are a positive influence on you in your life. Why? Because that's going to lift your spirit, right? It's going to remind you that there's still something good in the world. And you're going to see that, and it's going to be important. I talked to a guy this week. I was shipping a box, and I went into this store. I was shipping a box, and he had music on, Christmas music. I said, it's Christmas music. He goes, man, I love Christmas music. He goes, I got it tuned in. He goes, I'm listening to it. He goes, and you know what? It's a good influence on me in my life. He goes, in fact, at my age, after all the things I've done, he goes, I'm really careful about everything I listen to now because I believe what you put in ultimately starts to shape what you get out. I was like, wow. I just came in to mail a box. You're dropping nuggets right now. I'm going to use this weekend. Thank you. But it's simple, but it's true, right? You got to seek it out. Let's think about my own life. A couple different seasons that I would say were really, really dark for me. One dark season was a season of addiction and trying to navigate that as a teenager and coming out of that. And I remember one of the hardest parts of coming out of that season was that I had to separate from people that I was caught up with in that life. And I still loved them, I still cared about them, but for a good while, I had to make a break and separate because I couldn't continue to be around them without being pulled back into what I was trying to get out of. And some of you may be there in your life right now. And it wasn't just addiction for me. I can remember about 7 or 8 years ago, I had some peers in ministry that I was around, and I just remember I'm not trying to judge people. I just remember feeling like these people are so cynical about the church and about God, and they've been around it so long. They've lost the sense of awe and wonder, and I don't want to become that. You ever been around somebody and thought, man, I don't want to become that? Cynical, jaded, hard-hearted, negative, critiquing everything always. Said, I just don't want to become that. So these may be great people, God bless them, but I remember sitting down with my wife, Lori, saying, look, these are great people, whatever, but I'm not hanging out with them anymore to the best of my ability. I'm going to go get around people that have joy and love in their heart. You can criticize anything. There are problems with everything. I want to be around people who aren't always reminding me of the problems. I can turn on the news if I want to know the problems. I want to be around some people that are going to help me make a difference to get towards a solution, or at least, and solution's a big word, right? Maybe it's not even solution. Maybe it's just at least be a positive influence in the world. Life is too short, friends. We're going to die. Anybody thought about this recently? Because every now and then I just think like, I'm gonna die. It's a limited window. So I'm not gonna waste it walking around being angry and bitter and upset and jaded when I can take my limited life, what I got left, and focus it on positive things. So I wanna get around light, love, God, faith, good people, good influences. I had a rough day a couple weeks ago, and I remember, I'm just standing there, and I'm having a rough day, which means I want to listen to, like a really sad country song. You know what I'm talking about? I lost my girl, I lost my house, I lost my horse, and I'm drunk. I want to listen to a really sad country song where it all goes away, but instead, or maybe for you it's rock and roll or whatever, the blues. You want to listen to the blues. You want to feel it deep down. You want to have that moment. But instead, I remember I put Central Live on right there, streaming it right there on my phone. This is not a marketing pitch. I'm just telling you, this is real. Standing in my house, I put Central Live on, and I just start singing like I'm Drew. We all want to be like Drew Bodine secretly. Got my hat. I'm singing and you know what? I felt better after about 15 minutes of walking around, just sort of having a moment, when I play music now, I'm pretty low tech anymore because I'm always moving, right? So I just put my phone in my back pocket and it's got like a jukebox. It just follows you around everywhere you go, right? So I'm singing, I'm worshiping. It's awesome. I'm seeking out the light. I'm trying to find the light. So what we do over the next few weeks, we want to experience a holiday that's more merry and bright. Don't focus on the darkness. Focus on getting around the light. Jesus and his love and his light, that'll make an impact in your heart and in your life. Here's another thought, and that's to trade obligation for celebration. To trade obligation for celebration. I saw this Charlie Brown cartoon. It's one of my favorites. I've held on to it for a long time. We're going to bring it up here, but Charlie Brown's standing there. He says, this is my depressed stance. He says, when you're depressed, it makes a lot of difference how you stand. The worst thing you can do is straighten up and hold your head high because then you'll start to feel better. He says, if you're going to get any joy out of being depressed, you've got to stand like this. Oh, I love that. A lot of us walking around in our depressed stance, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes the holidays, the extra hours, the overtime, all the money coming in and all the money going out can leave you in the depressed stance. So Isaiah's looking out and he's going, hey, look, in the darkness, a light's going to shine. He says in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 4, he says, for you, speaking of God, will break the yoke of their slavery and lift the heavy, burden from their shoulders. How many of you would like some burden lifted from your shoulders? Sorry, anybody thought this last week? Man, I need a massage, man. I'm just so tight. I can't even turn my neck. You ever had that moment, right? I've done that all week long. I don't know why. I'm like, I can't even turn my neck. Lori. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, but I try. Feels like a burden. Lift the heavy burden from their shoulders. He says, you will break the oppressor's rod, just as you did when you destroyed the army of Midian. Army of Midian. Now, that's interesting. The army of Midian is a reference to the story of Gideon in the Old Testament of the Bible. And Gideon was this guy. It's a really cool story, but I'll be brief. But Gideon was this... had this army that God kept making smaller and smaller and smaller. He's supposed to go fight the Midianites, these enemies, and God keeps making the army smaller, and it gets down to like 300 people. And he's like, dude. And God's like, now we're getting it down to about the right size, Gideon. Because he wanted Gideon to know, when you find yourself in the battle, you depend on me, and I'll help you get through the battle. You have a huge army, you're going to look around and say, well, God helped us, but we could have done it anyway. So God put him in a position where all he could do was depend on him and trust him. And then he told them, they were to take these clay pots and they had torches underneath them, and they were to march around with clay pots over their torches. And then the last minute, they're to break the clay pots, blow these horns, and it's night, and that's how they're going to win the battle, which I'm sure Gideon's like, okay. So they go out. Typical biblical story of this shouldn't work. This is craziness. But God's going to show his power in this moment. So they go out, they've got these torches, they've got these clay pots over their torches. All of a sudden they break the clay pots, they blow the horns. And what happens is it's dark, it's silent, and the enemy all of a sudden hears this sound come out of nowhere in the midst of this sort of silence. So it's deafening, it's loud, it's scary. Then the enemy looks around and sees lights everywhere because now the clay pots have been broken, and they're like, we're being attacked, and they all start attacking one another in the chaos, and they wipe each other out. Gideon rolls up with the torches like, hey. And so the point is, sometimes the odds can be overwhelming and you're not sure how you're going to get through. And Isaiah's looking out and he's going, just like God showed up in the battle with the Midianites, just like they broke their torches and the light suddenly shone out and the victory was won. He says, in the midst of that deep darkness where people live and walk, Christ's birth will be a light that will break forth that can ultimately lead to victory. And so, friends, we believe as people of faith that Christ won that victory. That means this week, next week, we look back, right? We look back and we celebrate what God has done. Now, you can get caught up, I can get caught up in obligation. We can all look around, I got so much stuff to do. I got to get my Christmas cards out. I got to get, the decorations up. I got to get the gifts bought. I got to figure out how to pay for the gifts. I got to make sure we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I got to work the extra hours. I got to get the extra time in. I got to plan the trip. I got to plan the vacation, right? We can get all caught up in obligation, or we can focus on celebration. And we can just acknowledge, hey, it may not be the greatest Christmas that I've ever had in terms of all the stuff, but it's going to be a great, meaningful Christmas because I'm going to remember I'm here because Christ has already won the victory. He's already won the victory. He's already done it. In fact, I went to the Vegas benefit concert on Friday night, Vegas Strong benefit concert. It was awesome, and it was really cool to see the city of Las Vegas come together and raise some money for those who were affected directly by the mass shooting that happened in Las Vegas back on October 1st. But there was this moment that was it's probably my favorite moment of the entire thing. And you might think this is a strange moment to say this was your favorite moment, because it was like Imagine Dragons and the Killers and all these people. But I loved it when the Cirque crew came out and they were doing some performances. And so one of them, they got on a seesaw and went back and forth, and they went really high, and then all of a sudden this person did all this acrobatic stuff, and they were supposed to land on the shoulders of somebody who was also standing on the shoulders of somebody else, right? They just do amazing stuff. You ever just watch what they do? You're like, oh, wow. Like seriously, when I get up in the morning, I can't even get to my knees, much less my toes. I'm like, oh, like how do they do that stuff with their bodies? Amazing. But on Friday night, they did this thing and they missed the landing. And there was there was like padding there, but they didn't need it because they were able to catch her, which was pretty cool, how the way she slipped and they caught her and then they sort of gracefully set her down. And they all looked at each other, and I mean, they looked for like 1 second. And I thought they were just gonna move on. You missed it, you move on. And they went right back and they started doing the seesaw thing again, and they stuck it the second time. I got it on video for you. I'm just gonna show you right here. We're just gonna have a moment here together. Let's just bring it up. This is the second time. There we go, just like I do. Just like that. And now I'm gonna, look at that. But that was my favorite moment of the whole night, because right before that, they missed it. But they did it again, and that individual stuck the landing. It was awesome. So life is all about what you do after you fall down, right? Life's all about what you do after you fail, after you blow it, after you make mistakes. And friends, what we remember at Christmas is that the birth of Christ was God coming into the world incarnate in the form of Jesus, that he lived and died and rose again for us because he loves us so that we could be in a relationship with him. That's the Christian message. That's the good news of God. And what that means is Christ has won the victory. Christ stuck the landing. So yeah, we miss, we fail, we blow it, we mess up, but we remember and celebrate that Jesus ultimately has won the victory. And that can lead us to celebrate through the whole thing. If you get lights up this year, then as you're putting your lights up, remember, Christ is the light coming into the world. Celebrate his victory. You get your decorations up. Remember all that Christ has done and celebrate his victory. Let's say you don't get your decorations up this year. Doesn't matter, because Christ still won and his victory still stands. Let's say you're in a place this year where you're getting gifts and you're buying those gifts. But remember, the only reason we give and exchange gifts is because of the greatest gift that God gave us in Jesus Christ. And so whether you give a gift or get a gift, whether you don't give a gift and don't get a gift, either way, we celebrate the victory of God in our lives. So here's what my goal is over the next few weeks. I simply want to stay in the light, be around positive people, be around godly things, be around things that are going to encourage me and lift my spirits and help me look to God and focus on him. And then I simply want in my life to trade all the obligation of this season for celebration. Every day I want to just celebrate. Look, Christ has won the victory. It's going to be okay. Christ has won the victory. It's going to be okay. Another way that we can make this holiday season merry and bright in our lives is then to simply shine the light. To simply shine the light. I remember last holiday season, around this time of year, I met an individual for the first time and was talking to him, and he said, we started talking about church, and I said, I'm a pastor and all that, and he's like, interesting, and we started talking about the church, and he played in a band, and I'm like, well, you definitely want to check out our band because they're awesome, and I could tell he's looking at me like, sure they are, pastor guy. I'm like, no, you gotta trust me, man. You just gotta come, you gotta do it. Well, the weeks went by. I kept texting him, hey, come to church, man. Come to church. Come meet me. I'll meet you there. It'll be great, and he kept kind of putting me off. And then all of a sudden, Christmas comes around, and I said, hey, here's all of our service times, right? I sent him the whole screenshot, the whole invite, sent it to him. Here's all the times. Here's when you can come. And, no response. You know exactly what I'm talking about here, right? Crickets. Christmas rolls around, and all of a sudden, he texts me, and he goes, hey, I think I'm going to come to that last one. Awesome. So he does. He comes. He shows up. I meet him. Great, get him seated and all that. And we go through the whole service. And at the end of the service, we invited people who made spiritual commitments to get a New Beginnings journal. And they could go and they could pick that journal up. And I'll just never forget that moment after Christmas when I'm standing out in the hallway, and here he comes walking down the hallway with his New Beginnings journal bag in his hand. And I remember I grabbed him. I said, did you make a spiritual commitment in your life? And he's like, yeah, man, it was awesome. And this was last year. It was just really good for me to be reminded in the most personal way. You never know what God can do with an invite. You never know what God can do when you screenshot service times and just go, hey, you might want to check this out. You never know what God can do. Not that we want to be annoying, but when you ask one more time. You just never know. And in that moment, here he made a spiritual commitment, decision, and then he began to attend Central and began to get involved, and God began to do work in his life, and faith started to come alive in his life for the first time in years, if for the first time in ever, I don't know. But that's what can happen through a simple invite. And that's one of the ways we can experience, really, I think, this holiday season being merry and bright is making it merry and bright for others by shining the light of God into the hearts and lives of others. Look at what Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6 says about Jesus. So we've been reading Isaiah chapter 9. When you get to verse 6, this is what it says about Jesus. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. For his government and its what? Peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. I'm reading that just so you know that I'm not just pulling out some passage in Isaiah, that as you go along, it actually is about Christ. It's a prophecy about Christ. The light that was dawning, the child that was born to bring hope to all of us in our lives. So shine your light, and let it make a difference in the lives of others. In fact, listen to what Jesus said about light. Let's look at this next verse in John chapter 8, verse 12. It says, Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to what? Life. You see that? You'll have the light that leads to life. It's not just light, it's the light that leads to something. The light that leads to life. That's what God wants to do in our hearts and in our lives. My wife and I were talking this past week about our grandparents on her side of the family. And her grandmother, Joanne, wonderful, amazing, special woman. And then she's a newlywed. She's 89 years old. Why not? We're all gonna die someday. 89, tied the knot to her 92-year-old husband. Because life is short, baby. Here's a picture of him. We're gonna bring this up. Look at that. 89, 92. And they are the sweetest, most life-giving people. He's amazing. In fact, my father-in-law sat down with him after he had proposed and she had said yes, and then the kids heard about it. Can't control those grandparents, man. You know what I'm saying? He sat down with him and he said, I want you to know that my mom, is showing early signs of dementia. And it's in the family, and we kind of know where this is going. And I don't want you to have to bear the burden of that alone, because I just want to talk to you about it. And he looked right at my father-in-law and he said, you know what? She's my girl. It's gonna be okay. And I think about God and his love for us, and I think God loves us kind of like that. We all got our own early forms of dementia. And I think God's saying, that's my kid. It's my son, that's my daughter. It's gonna be okay. I know what I'm getting into when I enter into a relationship with you. He knew what he was getting into. When Christ came into this world, it was a world filled with darkness. Darkness of hurt, pain, loss, violence, and the darkness of not knowing how to fix any of it. And he came anyway to redeem it. And Jesus says he's the light that leads to life. And in some aspects of that, I believe we can experience that by faith in our lives today. But ultimately, it's also a promise for heaven tomorrow, for the time when the world will no longer be in darkness. Christmas began that light coming into the world, and ultimately, the Bible says Christ will step out on our horizon and return. And at that point, at that time, everyone will see. And the light will shine even brighter. And so friends, between now and then, we can share that light with others. We can do it by investing in relationships with people, maybe over the next few weeks, inviting people to come along. We can do it by maybe jumping into Marion Bright, sponsoring a child for $47 or more. And then at each of our locations, you get this little bulb, and you can screw this light bulb in. We're gonna light up our lobbies across our locations, just reminding us each bulb represents a child, an individual who we're helping bless this Christmas. Because when you shine the light, right? When you shine the light, that will impact your Christmas. It'll impact your heart. It'll impact your life. Maybe you're here today, and maybe God's been trying to get your attention. Maybe he's been calling you to come home to him to experience his love and his grace. I'd just love to give you an opportunity to reach out to him and make this holiday season the most merry and bright. Would all of you please bow your heads and close your eyes? If you'd like to become a follower of Jesus today, you can begin that journey by just repeating this prayer after me. Just say, dear God, I thank you for loving me. Thank you for sending Jesus into the world. I believe he died on the cross for my sins. I believe he rose again. Forgive me for my sins. Give me the gift of eternal life. Help me face the challenges I'm up against. God, I surrender my life to you. In Christ's name. Friends, with every head bowed and every eye closed, if that's your prayer today, if it's your commitment, I'm going to ask you to just slip your hand in the air wherever you're at. Just slip your hand in the air. If you're watching online, whatever location you're at, slip your hand in the air. Acknowledge you're reaching out to God today in your heart and in your life. God, we thank you for your love. I thank you for each individual just reaching out to you. And I pray that you will work in their life in a huge way. Let them know that you care about them, that you hear them, that your peace is available to them. And God, may they, throughout this week and the coming weeks, just grow more and more in their faith. May they find a firm footing in who you are and confidence in who you are and the courage and the trust to move forward boldly. God, we love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, friends, I want to ask you not only to give it up for our location pastors at this time, but also let's give it up for those who made spiritual commitments at this time in their life. Thank you, guys.